Zambia 2021 Census. Everyone counts. Chapter 2. How to conduct a good interview. While good interviewing is an art, certain basic principles apply to every successful enumerator. Here we introduce you to some guidelines on building personal rapport with respondents and conducting a successful interview. A comfortable relationship between the enumerator and the respondent is a foundation for good interviewing. The respondent's impression of you will largely determine the atmosphere for the whole interview. If you seem uninterested, bored, or hostile, the respondent will most probably act in a similar way. People tend to react favorably if they think the interviewer is someone with whom they will enjoy speaking. Building a good rapport. As an enumerator, a good respondent rapport based on trust and consent is what convinces total strangers to provide you with intimate details of their lives. This trust is why you have been given documentation of your role as a census enumerator and a census apron to show that you are who you say you are. In order to build good rapport with respondents, you should make a good first impression. When you arrive at the household, do your best to make the respondent feel at ease. With a few well-chosen words, you can put the respondent in the right frame of mind for the interview. Open the interview with a smile and greeting, such as "Good afternoon," and then proceed with your introduction. Obtain respondents' consent to be interviewed. Start the interview by introducing yourself and informing the household the purpose of your visit. Special consent statements are included at the beginning of the questionnaire. The statements explain the purpose of the survey. See section 6.1 for additional details on the consent statement. Always have a positive approach. Do not adopt an apologetic manner. Do not use words such as, "Are you too busy?" Such questions invite refusal before you start. Assure confidentiality of responses. If the respondent is hesitant about responding to the interview or asks what the data will be used for, explain that the information you collect will remain confidential. No individual names will be used for any purpose, and all information will be grouped together. To maintain this trust, you should never mention other interviews or show completed questionnaires to the supervisor in front of a respondent or any other person. Answer any questions from the respondent frankly. Before agreeing to be interviewed, the respondent may ask you some questions about the census. Be direct and pleasant when you answer. If the respondent for the household questionnaire asks how long the interview will take, tell the respondent that the interview usually takes about 36 minutes. Respondents may ask questions or want to talk further about the topics you bring up during the interview. It is important not to interrupt the flow of the interview, so tell them that you will be happy to answer their questions or to talk further after the interview. Interview the respondent alone. The presence of a third person during an interview can prevent you from getting frank, honest answers from a respondent. It is therefore very important that the individual interview be conducted privately and that all questions be answered by the respondent. If other people are present, explain to the respondent that some of the questions are private and ask to interview the person in the best place for talking alone. Sometimes asking for privacy will make others more curious, so they will want to listen. You will have to be creative. Establishing privacy from the beginning will allow the respondent to be more attentive to your questions. If it is impossible to get privacy, you may have to carry out the interview with the other people present. However, in such circumstances, try to separate yourself and the respondent from the others as much as possible. You can also sit very near to the respondent and lower your voice when asking the questions so that others who are nearby cannot hear the questions. Tips for getting accurate information. Be neutral throughout the interview. Most people are polite and will tend to give answers that they think you want to hear. It is therefore very important that you remain absolutely neutral as you ask the questions. Never, either by expression on your face or by the tone of your voice, allow the respondent to think that he or she has given the right or wrong answer to the question. Never appear to approve or disapprove of any of the respondent's replies. Never suggest answers to the respondent. If a respondent's answer is not relevant to a question, do not prompt him or her by saying something like, "I suppose you mean that? Is that right?" In many cases, he or she will agree with your interpretation of his or her answer, even when that is not what he or she meant. Rather, you should probe in such a manner that the respondent himself or herself comes up with a relevant answer. You should never read out the list of coded answers to the respondent, even if he or she has trouble answering. Do not change the wording or sequence of questions. The wording of the questions and their sequence in the questionnaire must be maintained. If the respondent has not understood the question, you should repeat the question slowly and clearly. If there is still a problem, you may reword the question, being careful not to alter the meaning of the original question. Provide only the minimum information required to get an appropriate response. Handle hesitant respondents tactfully. There will be situations where the respondent simply says, "I don't know," gives an irrelevant answer, acts very bold or detached, or contradicts something that they have already said. In these cases, you must try to reinterest them in the conversation. For example, if you sense that they are shy or afraid, try to remove their shyness or fear before asking the next question. Spend a few moments talking about things unrelated to the interview. For example, their town or village, the weather, their daily activities, etc., etc. If the respondent is given irrelevant or elaborate answers, do not stop them abruptly or rudely, but listen to what they have to say. Then try to steer them gently back to the original question. A good atmosphere must be maintained throughout the interview. The best atmosphere for an interview is one in which the respondent sees the interviewer as a friendly, sympathetic, and responsive person who does not intimidate them and to whom they can say anything without feeling shy or embarrassed. As indicated earlier, a major problem in gaining the respondent's confidence may be one of privacy. This problem can be prevented if you are able to obtain a private area in which to conduct the interview. If the respondent is reluctant or unwilling to answer a question, explain once again that the same question is being asked of women or men all over Zambia, and the answers will all be merged together. Detailed guidance on how to handle reluctant respondents is given. If the respondent is still reluctant, in copy, you select Refused. In the copy application, see section 6.4 for detailed instructions on this portion of the CAPI data entry application. And seek further guidance from your supervisor. Remember, the respondent cannot be forced to give an answer. Do not make assumptions. You must not assume the ability and knowledge of the respondent. For example, do not assume people from rural areas or those who are less educated or illiterate do not know about some complicated topics. Do not hurry the interview. Ask the questions slowly to ensure that the respondent understands what is being asked. After you have asked a question, pause and give the respondent time to think. If the respondent feels hurried or is not allowed to formulate their own opinion, they may respond with, "I don't know," or give an inaccurate answer. If the respondent is answering without thinking just to speed up the interview, say to the respondent, "There is no hurry. Your opinion is very important, so consider your answers carefully." Language of the interview. We have arranged our enumerator hiring in such a way that you'll be working in an area in which your languages are spoken. So there should be few cases in which respondents do not speak your language. In such cases, you might be able to find another language that both of you speak and you'll be able to conduct the interview in that language. However, in some cases, it will not be possible for you to find a language which both you and the respondent speak. In this case, try to find out what languages the respondent does speak. Then tell your supervisor that he or she can arrange for a person to conduct the interview who speaks that language. Do not use interpreters, since this not only jeopardizes the quality of the interview, but also will mean that the interview will take more time to conduct. However, if the respondent does not speak a language which any of your team members speak, talk to your supervisor for guidance. We will be practicing interviews in the local languages during the training. However, there may be times when you will have to rephrase the wording of the questions to make the respondent understand. It is very important not to change the meaning of the question when you rephrase it or interpret it into another language. Probing techniques. Probing is a technique you will have to employ in order to obtain a complete and relevant answer from the respondent if they are giving vague, incomplete, or unhelpful answers. There are a number of reasons why respondents sometimes do not answer questions adequately. In everyday social conversation, people normally speak in vague and loose terms. Therefore, it is understandable that respondents may at first answer questions in a way which is not clear or specific. It is essential, however, to encourage respondents to express themselves more precisely and in more specific terms. Respondents may not understand the meaning of the question or could provide a response without necessarily answering the question. It is easy to be misled by a respondent who is talkative and gives a full and detailed response that is irrelevant. In most cases, respondents give an irrelevant answer because they have missed an important word or phrase in the question. Probing, therefore, has two major functions. Number one, to motivate respondents to expand upon or clarify their answers. Number two, to make the respondents answer precisely so that irrelevant and unnecessary information can be eliminated. Probing must be done without antagonizing the respondent. Respondents must not be made to feel that you are probing because their answer is incorrect or unacceptable. The kind of probe to use must be adapted to the particular respondent and the particular answer given. There are some general types of probes that are frequently used, but it is important to avoid getting into the habit of using the same probe. Instead, you must seek to understand what the intention of each question is, so that you will always know in what way a particular answer falls short of being satisfactory. The probe then should be devised to meet this gap. This will require you to be tactful. It is very important to use neutral probes. That is, you must not imply to the respondent that you expect a particular answer or that you are dissatisfied with an answer. The reason for probing is to motivate the respondent to answer more fully or more precisely without introducing biasness. Bias is a distortion of responses caused by the interviewer's favoring of one answer over another. Example: P24. What is Name's predominant language of communication at home? Answer: Bemba and Tonga. Poor probe. Oh, you mean Tonga? This will push the respondent into saying, yes, it is Tonga. Proper probe. Which one of the two is predominant? Some respondents have difficulties in putting their thoughts into words. Others may give unclear or incomplete answers. Still others may be reluctant to give you certain information. In dealing with such cases, use procedures which encourage and clarify answers. The following kinds of probes may help you obtain more accurate responses. Repeat the question. When the respondent does not seem to understand the question, or when he or she misinterprets it, or seems unable to make up his or her mind, or when he or she strays from the subject, the most useful technique is to repeat the question just as it was asked the first time. An expectant pause. The simplest way to convey to a respondent that you know he or she has begun to answer the question, but that you feel he or she has more to say, is to be silent. A pause, often accompanied by an expectant look or a nod of the head, gives the respondent time to gather his or her thoughts. Repeating the respondent's reply. Simply repeating what the respondent has said as soon as he or she has stopped is often an excellent probe. Neutral questions or comments. Neutral questions or comments are frequently used to obtain unbiased, clearer, and complete responses. The following are examples of the most commonly used neutral probes. Anything else? Any other reason? Any other? Could you tell me more about your thinking on that? Would you tell me what you think? What do you mean? Why do you feel that way? Which would be closer to the way you feel? These probes indicate that the enumerator is interested and they make a direct request for more information. Occasionally, a respondent will give you an "I don't know" answer. This can mean a number of things. For instance, the respondent does not understand the question and answers "I don't know" to avoid saying he or she does not understand. The respondent is thinking the question over and says "I don't know" to fill the silence and to give himself or herself time to think. The respondent may be trying to evade the issue, or he or she may feel that the question is too personal and does not want to hurt the feelings of the enumerator by saying so in a direct manner. The respondent may really not know. Try to decide which of the above is the case. Do not immediately settle for an "I don't know" reply. If you remain silent but expectant, the respondent will usually think of something to say. Silence and waiting are frequently your best probe for an "I don't know" answer. You'll also find that the other useful probes are, "Well, what do you think?" or "I just want your own ideas on that." Always probe at least once to obtain a response to a question before accepting it as a final answer. But be careful not to antagonize the respondent or force an answer if he or she again says that "I don't know." You should stop probing only when you have a clear, complete answer. However, if at any time the respondent becomes irritated or annoyed, stop probing the question. We do not want the respondent to refuse to complete the rest of the interview. Controlling the interview. While it is important to maintain a pleasant and courteous manner in order to obtain the respondent's cooperation, you must also be able to control the interview so that it may be completed in a timely and orderly manner. For example, when answering the questions, the respondent may offer a lengthy explanation of problems or complaints. In this situation, you must be able to bring the discussion to a close as soon as possible so that the interview may continue. Politely tell the respondent that you understand what he or she is saying but would like to complete the interview. If necessary, you may try to postpone any outside discussion by saying, "Okay, let's finish the interview first, then talk about that later." In some cases, the respondent may start to provide information about some topic which is covered at a later stage during the same interview. Again, you must control the interview by telling the respondent that you must ask other questions first and that he or she should wait until later to provide information on that particular topic. Ending the interview. After all the questions have been asked, thank the respondent and mention that their cooperation has been most helpful in providing information for the census. Also inform the respondent that you will return to update the information if necessary.